So we just recorded this awesome show on star Michael Jordan cards, and then just on a normal day, I'm looking at Twitter, and Nat Turner tweets that PSA is now going to begin grading star Michael Jordan cards, and it seems like a good percentage of that stuff that we just talked about is changed a little bit. But we felt like really if we recorded that and left it as is, we would be really leaving out a big part of the story. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this section first, but to the viewers, you're going to notice that there's this whole separate section that's going to come after that. We recorded before the big news dropped. So we hope that you find that perspective interesting, especially when sort of juxtaposed with this one. But Bryan, this is obviously huge news. How do you feel about it? What are your first takeaways on this big new news that PSA will be grading star cards going forward?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the hobby are absolutely blown away. My thoughts on this are twofold. Number one, I personally saw it coming because I have a collector who I'm in an ongoing transaction with, who was actually friends with Steve Taft. And he told me, hey, just a heads up, it's not going to be long, and they're going to grade these, the 84 star, number 101, and maybe other star cards as well. So I wasn't really surprised. And I know a lot of collectors out there had heard rumblings and rumors about, bringing Steve in to give him some guidance and go forward. And again, I didn't see anything in the news breaking that said Steve Taft was involved, but I would assume they are going to lean on him to gather the expertise and whatnot, and use his grading guide to start grading the car. And the second thing was, I just don't think it really, again, I think that the star card's going to go on a run. You know how hype is, and cards are driven by hype, and it's going to be talked about, and it's going to be bantered back and forth. I just, long term, the print run's not changing. There's not any more 84 star 101 cards out there. The biggest concern that I have, and we can talk about this in more detail, is I think it's going to affect the pop report as it pertains to the 1984 star 101 card. Because if people are going to take BGS star, crack those cards, and submit those cards to PSA for grading, 99 times out of 100, they're not going to pull those cracked BGS star cards off of the BGS pop report, but we're going to add one to the new, PSA pop report. And so it's going to look like sometimes one card is going to become two. And if they redo it twice, 3, 4 times, chasing a higher number with PSA, it could have a kind of a negative effect, I think, on the pop report, and make it appear that there are more PSA or BGS graded out there than there actually are. So that's just one thought that comes to my mind. And when you're talking about such a small sample size, a couple hundred, screw ups or erroneous listings for a card, could skew the perspective of what the actual pop is, I think.
Welcome everyone to episode number 1. I'm super excited to do this today for our first episode here. We have the Bryan Denison, the Cajun cardboards, one of the best guys that I know in the hobby, and somebody who has a ton of passion. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Appreciate it.
Today's topic is going to be something that I know is near and dear to both of our hearts, but maybe particularly Bryan. And so I wanted to sort of give some background on why we felt like this card, the 1984-85 Michael Jordan XRC, the 101, why it is the card that we decided to choose for the first episode today. And the reason is that Bryan and I were talking a few weeks ago about different things that we were looking for in the hobby. And Bryan actually mentioned to me, he said, I would love to find a really nice XRC. So as part of today's show, I thought it'd be neat to talk about 3 different sort of segments, or three sort of different parts. The first is I want to talk about the significance of the card, Bryan, like why it matters. Then we'll move on to talking about rarity. And then the last piece that we'll talk about are the technical aspects of the card. So let me start by asking you, when you think about this card and want to say to yourself, like why it's significant, why it matters, not only to you, but to the whole of the hobby, what kind of comes to your mind?
Well, first of all, if you call it the XRC in a public forum like this, you're going to get death threats because there's people out there, Adam, that love this card so much and they're so passionate about it that they hate hearing other people refer to it as the XRC because they would call it the what? RC, right?
Right.
So watch your back. You might need to move down here and live with me in Louisiana and hide from these passionate star collectors. But that's a little aside there. I'm just trying to help you out as a friend. What makes this card special is really clear. It's either the first or the second licensed card for Michael Jordan in a Chicago Bulls uniform. And the reason I kind of say it like that with an asterisk or a caveat is that most people would say that his 5x7 star card, the oversized, the giant, right? The giant star card came out first, but there are people who know a lot more about the star product than me who would say this star 101 actually came out first. So it's either the first or the second, depending on who you listen to or where you gather your information. I'm not an expert, but I've digested a lot of information from the internet. And so I know it's either his first or his second card. So that alone makes it incredibly, relevant and pertinent in the hobby and a must have probably for any Jordan collector. And I'm sure we'll get to why I don't have one in my collection yet. We're about to get there.
So I think, it's fun to kind of riff a little bit about the 5x7 for a second, because that's one that people don't talk about as much. But even if the 101, I'm going to call it the 101 now, because I know, according to you, I can't call it XRC, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. But the reason that I think the 101 is got that leg up on the 5x7 is it's part of that base set. And one thing that we know is that people love the first card from the first base set. And so, that's part of it. And to go along with what you were saying also about the XRC, I pulled this up. I interviewed Nat Turner coming up on about a year and a half ago now. And I asked him a question actually about the Fleer rookie. And this is what he said, part of his answer. Here's what he said. He said, but to be blunt, it's not actually Michael Jordan's rookie card. Speaking of the 86 Fleer. He'd been playing in the league for 2 years before that. So his rookie card is in fact the star card from 1984-85, which is a beautiful card, the red bordered one. But it's just like the Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps. Everyone associates that with his rookie card, when in fact it is the 1951 Bowman. So I think what you're getting at is there's a segment of our hobby that really doesn't view the 86 Fleer as his rookie. They view the star card as that. And to me, that's super interesting because if that's his one true real rookie card, and we know it's a lot rarer, it makes you, as you talked about, as a Jordan fan, it makes you feel like that's a card I need to have in my collection.
Yeah. I just did some quick Cajun math. That's 38 years ago, and people are still arguing what the rookie card is. And so this is just my take on it. If the hobby hasn't conclusively decided what his rookie card is, it never will. But it's amazing because there's passionate opinions on both sides. And I came back into the hobby super heavy around 2016, and I just naturally gravitated into the 86 Fleer side. Because, I thought pack pulled meant everything. And so the 86 Fleer people, the people who claim that the 86 Fleer is his true rookie card will, their argument hinges squarely on the fact that you pulled pack cards out of a pack and you may or you may not get the Michael Jordan. And that had to be, a precondition to a true rookie card. And then the star people are like, why? It's his NBA licensed card, earliest one from a true base set, period. That's his rookie card. And so there's definitely, valid points from both sides. I don't think it matters, Adam. I think whether you think it's his XRC or his RC doesn't matter. The card matters. It's super scarce, which I'm sure we're about to talk about. The fact you quoted Nat Turner, who is at Collectors Universe and PSA doesn't currently yet grade these star cards is truly ironic, right? If Nat is looking at the card saying, I think it might be his rookie card, it's kind of what he's hitting at. That's pretty ironic, because I think PSA stopped grading them about 1991 and hasn't gone back since. And there's an amazing, interesting story in there if you want to check out some websites, or maybe we can talk about it today. But there's an amazing story about why they didn't keep grading it, and are they going to start again, and what dictates whether they will or not. So there's tons and tons of stories about not only this Star 101 card, but also Star product in general.
Yeah, I think the last couple things I want to say about significance are, the first thing that you hit on was the thing that I was hoping we would talk a lot about, which is simply it's his first card, right? And so it was made 2 full years before, before the 86 Fleer card was, and to me that's really significant. The other thing that I think is really a great take home from this conversation is what you just said about it not mattering is spot on to me, because you look at like the Mickey Mantle, we know that the 51 Bowman is his rookie. We know that it's totally accepted at this point, but it's not the more recognizable card, and that's okay, right? The 51 Bowman is the rookie, the 52 Topps is the big card. So I think that's an interesting way to look at that, and an interesting corollary to this card. Yeah. All right, now let's move to rarity, which I think for this card is particularly an interesting sort of variable when we talk about iconic cards. So when you think about the Michael Jordan Star 101 and its rarity, how would you describe that to somebody else, either somebody who's within the hobby or somebody who's not?
Yeah. Look, we talked about what's the rookie card, what's not. Whether this is a rookie card or not, is up to public opinion. Whether the card is rare or not is not. It is rare. It is scarce. It is not just scarce from a grading perspective. It is scarce from a manufacturing production print run perspective. There's all kinds of opinions out there about how many were actually printed. It's somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000, depending on who you want to listen to or who you want to trust. Whether you want to trust the convicted felon who printed the cards and then tried to duplicate them and make a second career out of it. You could trust his print run, or you could just trust the print run of other experts who've kind of done some reverse engineering math. But the one thing that I can hang my hat on is there's been 1,088 Star cards graded by Beckett. There's been almost 40,000 86 Fleer graded by PSA, BGS, and SGC. That's 3.8%, if I did my math right. That makes it a little bit more scarce than the 86 Fleer, and makes it scarce by anybody's standards.
So here's you and I have the same numbers. Here's the full breakdown from my perspective. So the Star 101, as you said, has been graded by Beckett 1,088 times. PSA graded it, as you mentioned earlier, they graded it a grand total of 13 times. So before they stopped. So that's kind of a fun fact there. So between the two, you've got 1,101 graded, Star Michael Jordan cards. And then between Beckett and PSA, you got 36,463 copies of the 86 Fleer, meaning that there are 33 copies of a graded Fleer rookie for every one of the Star rookie. And so, that's why rarity is a segment here on this card, is that like it can't be overlooked. You mentioned the 3%, like that's we're not comparing apples and oranges here, right? Like these cards are dramatically different. And I'm not saying this to disparage the 86 Fleer card. I know that's a card that you particularly love and I love too. It's just that, you have to look at them and say, okay, which one is actually going to be the harder card to find? And on this comparison, there really is no comparison.
Yeah. If you draw a line down the middle of your paper and then you're looking at different aspects about what makes a card great, some of them are up to debate. Rarity and scarcity are not up to debate. Like those are clearly check marks in the column of, the Star card. It's not even close. That's not an argument, right? All
right. So if I look back at the history of these two cards, here's how I see it from my perspective. And I'm interested to hear how you feel about this. When I was a kid, we viewed the Star Jordan as like just a ghost. I don't think I ever even saw one growing up. It was, always in Beckett as like the highest dollar sort of modern era card. And, you would hear stories about somebody who once had one or whatever. Whereas the Fleer was obviously always a hard card to find, but every once in a while you would see it. And I think that was reflected in the pricing. I know you've done some research on like the history of how the pricing has fluctuated. I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. The method of distribution wasn't suited for kids our age, right? I mean, we were looking for cards in packs at the convenience store or the gas station, they call it now, right? You couldn't find star cards there. You had to order them or buy them, in team bags or buy them at the arena. And there's no pro teams, around me. So yeah, Fleer is what we identified with. But going back through history, and I've got a few notes just jotted down, I've plotted the 1986 Fleer versus the BGS 9, right? We throw out the BGS 9.5 star because it's a phantom. There's just none out there, right? We have no data on that anyway, so we couldn't plot it if we wanted to. 86 Fleer PSA 10 versus star BGS 9. Stay with me. In 2015, the Fleer 10 was more valuable. In 2017, the Star 9, BGS 9, was almost twice as valuable. So in a 2-year period, it flipped the script. In 2018, they were the exact same value. All right. So we're coming back together. In 2020, 2 years later, the Fleer PSA 10 was worth almost double the Star. In 2021, we know the hobby went bananas, right? And the 86 Fleer was off to the races. The Star also grew, but not at nearly the same rate as the 86 Fleer. And so when we look at the last 2 years, and specifically, Adam, go look at the last 6 months, the 84 Star 101 BGS 9 is up 45%. The 86 Fleer PSA 10 is down 34%. So they're about to intersect again. They're just going back and forth and they're weaving. And I don't know, I'm not a macroeconomist, but I call it like I see it.
So I know you say you're not a macroeconomist. What could cause, it's the same player. It's clearly not, it has nothing to do with who's on the card. What causes this card to vary so much against each other throughout the years? Any thoughts on that at all?
Education. It's education of the hobby based on population. We're seeing it in other cards. Throw these 2 Jordan cards out. We're seeing it in other cards. People starting to better understand how many base prism there are. Too many. Oh, wait, there's that many silver prism PSA 10s? Too many. And so people are kind of adjusting what their tolerance level is for a population of a given card in a given grade. And I know it sounds crazy because I think it's the most popular card in all of sports card collecting, not just basketball. The 86 Fleer PSA 10, there are people out there who are of the opinion that that is a high pop card. It's 316, 18, 19, whatever you want to say it, that's too much. And they see the 84 Star is pop 72 in BGS 9. And so here comes this rise. I want the more rare one, right? I'm going to sell my 86 Fleer and I'm going to go buy 2 BGS 9s or 3 BGS 9s. So I think that's what's causing this is just education of hobby participants.
Okay, so follow-up question. We're at National together, and I know you happen to own a PSA 10 Michael Jordan Fleer rookie, right?
The answer is no. I know where you're going.
Okay, so where was I going?
You were going to ask me if someone offered me a few BGS 9 stars for my PSA 10 Jordan, would I make that trade? And the answer is no, but don't ask me to explain it. It's my baby and it's the grail, so I can't sell it.
Okay, so you're willing to acknowledge you wouldn't do it, but it's maybe somewhat on emotional reasons. Is that right?
100% emotional. I'll go take out a loan to buy the star card before I would make that trade. Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. Okay, so I've got a hard question for you on this one that we didn't prepare for, so I'm really interested to hear what you say. Which of these cards between the Fleer and the Star do you think has been cracked and regraded more often? So which one has a higher percentage of being cracked and regraded? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, okay, I'm glad you changed your question, because if it's total quantity that have been cracked and resubmitted, it's clearly the Fleer because it's a much larger sample size. If it's percentage, that's tough. I bet you the percentages are similar. We've talked about this. What did we say? 1,088 have been graded by Beckett. I talked about this on an in-depth episode that I did on my channel that we mentioned. And I was going to say there's probably, of those 1,088, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there was 800 individual cards and maybe 20% of them had been cracked and resub. Wouldn't you? I mean, what if you had a BGS 9, Adam, and your BGS 9 is worth, what do we got here? BGS 9's worth, let's just say it's $100,000 just to call it even. And you're 1/2, subgrade 1.5 away from a 9.5, which would make your card $1 million. Is it worth a couple of bites at the apple with Beckett's grading fee? I think it probably is. It might be worth 40 cracks at the apple, right?
So the thing that is clear to me here is that there's one particular subgrade of the 4, which we'll get into next segment, that is the line between subgrades on that particular variable is a pretty thin line. And there are times when, and I know you already know, so we won't ruin it, but there are times where a card comes back with that subgrade is a 7.5, and it could easily be an 8. But the difference between an overall grade value on this card in an 8.5 or an 8 is really significant. And so I would argue that the star card has been crossed at a higher percentage than people would maybe guess because of that. But there's no question that the 86 Fleer card has been crossed a lot from, company to company. There's people who buy a PSA card who want a BGS card. There's people who buy a BGS card who want a PSA card. And so overall percentage, I don't really know. I don't know how to predict that, but I do think there's more that have been cracked and resubbed in a star, more stars than people would probably guess.
Agreed. Yeah, the difference is with the Fleer, you can crack from one company to another, and vice versa. With Star, you're BGS, unless you have an old SCD or GAI slab, of course, in which case you're probably cracking those too and sending them to BGS, but you can't go back and forth with the Star, but you can go back and forth with the Fleer. So, you can keep taking turns, trying, hopefully there's nobody out there that's gone the wrong direction quick, because I know that can come back to bite you.
Okay, so now let's move into our third segment, which is the segment on the technical aspects of the card. And this, I kind of, I hinted at part of the issue. One of the things I did in preparation for this meeting, Bryan, again, that I didn't tell you about it, I think you'll find interesting, is I looked at the average subgrade across all 4 subgrades for all 1088 graded by Beckett. And so, we've got all 1088 in a spreadsheet basically, and we've averaged each of those subs. So which one of those would you guess, I'm just really testing here, sorry. Which one would you guess is the lowest subgrade for?
Not even close. That's my guess. I may sound like an idiot, but centering would be my guess easily.
No, you're definitely right. So here's your numbers for you.
Okay.
The subgrade on centering, the average across the 1088 is 7.54. Yeah. And so let's actually look at the card real quick here together, and so we can describe this to the viewers. So if you look at the card, and I know we both have it pulled up right now, on the left side, we're looking at a particularly fantastic example of this card that has far better centering than most copies, but it tells us, looking at this copy, we can see what is typical, and that is the left side on this card is a little bit more narrow than the right. This card is most often not as good as this copy that we're looking at. The ones that I've seen in the past are more usually about 25, 35 on the left side, and 65 to 75 on the right side. And so
agreed.
The hard part about this is with Beckett's standards, there is no leeway, right? There's a centering subgrades. The overall grade on the card, correct me if I'm wrong here, the overall grade on the card can only be 1/2 a grade higher than the centering subgrade. That's not true about a couple of the subgrades, but about the centering one, it can only be 1/2 a grade higher. So if a centering sub is a 7, it doesn't matter if the other 3 subs are all 10s, that card's coming back a 7.5. And that's why this card is such a difficult grade.
What to take it another step, of the 4 subgrades or the 4 measurements of a card that Beckett uses and other grading companies use as well, centering is the only one that doesn't change over the course of time. The other 3 they can't get better, right? You're not going to get a better surface on a paper card. You're not going to get better corners over time if you've got it in raw condition. You're not going to get better edges. Centering doesn't change. It is stagnant. The others can get worse. And so for that being said, and centering is still by far the lowest, that lets you know how predominant that subgrade is and how crucial that subgrade is. And like, to go a step further, the difference between, just like every PSA 10 1986 Fleer is not the same, right? Everyone would agree on that. If you've got an 8.5 with a, 8 centering, but you've got an 8.5 with a 9 centering, big value difference right there. Like, amongst star collectors, big value difference, especially for somebody who's in the market looking at these things. Centering is absolutely the premium, no question about it, hands down. It would be tough to argue that it wasn't.
So let me tell you the rest of the averages. The corner average is this. This won't surprise you. The corner average is the second lowest, and the average on that is an 8.3. The surface average is an 8.7, and the edges are 8.83s, which gives us a total average across all final grades of 7.69.
Yeah.
And so the average one of these cards is grading at less than an 8, and that to me, it's just not shocking. The centering really condemns the card to having a low, to having an average low grade. And so, when you look at the rest of the card, Bryan, one thing that actually kind of surprised me about those averages, I always sort of had heard that the surface was prone to issues because this card came in a team bag, right? It was a team set. And a lot of them sat for a long time, supposedly, in these team bags. And so you would think that the front rubbing against that plastic might cause some issues over the years. But I think what this data tells us is that that's actually not as common as maybe we would have thought. Is that
somebody chose the right texture of the bag? Like, way back in 1983 or 84, when they were packaging these into bags, they chose the right bags. Think about how much heat these things have been in, sitting in warehouses or houses or basements or whatever. It didn't melt. It didn't stick. There's no paper loss issues. That's pretty surprising. But staying to your point, 75% of the BGS graded cards are 7.5, 8, or 8.5. That just lets you know, like, when you've got a 9, when you're looking at a 9, that's special, right? There's 72 of them. If you're looking at a 9.5, I need to know your name, right? Because there's only 3. We haven't seen one sell in 8 years. So that's like Sasquatch, walking through the hobby. If you happen to see one of those, I mean, that's going to be on the cover of your magazine, every magazine. It's going to be on PWCC's literature. If we ran across a 9.5, it's almost like a privilege just to see the stinking card, yeah, man, look, 7.5, 7.79, whatever you said, that does not surprise me. That's what I would have guessed. I would have guessed just a shade under 8 would be the average grade. Yep.
Well, as we sort of wind down this episode, I know you mentioned to me something earlier before planning, during planning, about the quantity of 86 Fleer PSA 10s compared to Star high grade copies. Do you want to tell the listeners what we were talking about?
Yeah, I think what I was getting at was, if you combine all of the 8.5s, 9s, and the 3, not very many, 3 9.5s, combine all 3 of those, you have 326. There's 318 PSA 10s. I think about
318 or 319.
Yeah, it goes up. It changes, and I don't really understand. I know they get cracked or whatever, but I've seen it fluctuate. There's 316 to 319. There's somewhere in there, right? So there's almost an identical quantity of BGS 8.59 and 9.5 combined for the Star card as there are PSA 10s. So just an interesting comparison there, and that just lets you know, a lot of people came in the hobby very recently, right, Adam? And so they're what I would call grade snobs, right? If they don't see a 9.5 or a PSA 10 on their card, I don't want it. People are having to educate themselves. Hey, look, this is a little bit different back here in the 80s. If you've got an 8.5 Star, you've got something pretty dang special in your hand,
I think that's a fantastic note to end on. If I'm somebody who cares more about rarity than a specific number that is on a flip, then I think that you can make a case that an 8.5 Jordan Star card is as significant or as important to a high-end Michael Jordan collection than as a PSA 10 Fleer. I think some people would really scoff at that thought, but like, it came first, as we talked about earlier. It's just as rare, and because of this centering issue that plagues the card, it's just an incredible card to find, even in an 8.5. So Bryan, with that, I hope you find your Jordan Star. I hope it's a 9 or better. And any last thoughts?
Yeah, I want to find a 7.79. That's what I want to find. I want to find the perfectly average one just so I can be happy and check that off my box. But we'll see. I might have to move some stuff around and make a big play. I don't know. Maybe somebody watching's got the 9.5 and all of us in Louisiana can pool our money and bring it down here to Louisiana.
Well, Bryan, again, thank you for taking the time today to do this show. And yeah, good luck finding your Jordan Star card.
Appreciate it. I'll keep you posted.